At the arena, the crowd buzzed as the match ended abruptly. The Council of Elders and Carmen's faction had decided to withdraw. In the distance, the most powerful figures of the clan were preparing to leave the stands. Carmen, the man with long silver hair, could not accept this truth. He glared at Vincent with hatred, gritted his teeth and said, "Shh, consider yourself lucky, Vincent." But Vincent only smiled slightly. Although the match seemed over, he remained standing, his gaze cold and confident. He taunted, "Oh, you're running away? Afraid you'll lose, are you?" Carmen halted, his shoulders trembling, eyes filled with murderous intent. Vincent didn't flinch. Instead he smirked. What a pointless worry. Vincent's confident attitude made one of Carmen's subordinates exclaim in astonishment. Could this be Lord Carmen's first defeat? The question poured fuel on the fire. Carmen, already hot-tempered, completely lost control. He stopped and growled. "You." Carmen's rage erupted. His eyes flashed crazily, and he roared a lethal threat. "I'll really kill you." Seeing the situation about to spiral out of control, two of Carmen's men rushed in to restrain him. One panicked. "See, calm down, Carmen." The other advised. "Yes, sir. You can fight Vincent later, if you lose the match." The subordinate's careless words struck at Carmen's sky-high pride like a spark. He growled, eyes blazing with deadly light. "Me? Lose?" The words served as a warning that anyone who doubted his power would pay. The white-haired subordinate froze, realizing he had made a fatal mistake. Faced with Carmen's raging murderous aura, he stammered in fear, hurriedly explaining, "No, I meant." But it was too late. Carmen clenched his teeth, struggling to restrain the boiling fury in his chest. He knew his subordinate wasn't wrong, but his pride wouldn't allow him to admit it. Finally, Carmen turned and walked away. He called out loudly, "I know what you said is true, for now at least, so I will withdraw. But if you dare interfere in my affairs one more time." He stopped, eyes as sharp as knives, finishing his threat. "I'll start by cutting off your heads." Threatened by his master, the white-haired subordinate gritted his teeth in bitterness. He thought to himself, "Do you know who got you here? Just a little grown and already full of arrogance." Meanwhile, Vincent's teammate, a blonde man wearing glasses, grew impatient. "Big brother, we can't just let Carmen go like this." But Vincent remained calm, replying, "I know. At this point, we may have to use strong measures to stop him." Just then, a woman's voice rang from the arena stairs, cutting through the tension. A figure in white armor appeared. She called out, "May I take Vincent's place and accept that challenge?" This unexpected arrival and offer left Carmen, who had just turned his back, stunned. He widened his eyes, speechless. "You are..." Not only Carmen, even Vincent was completely shocked. He recognized the newcomer and stammered, "Sister is..." The mysterious woman finally fully revealed herself. In exquisite white armor, she exuded a powerful, commanding presence. A cry of amazement rang out, and the arena erupted when the name was announced. Lady Henna. News of Henna spread quickly through the crowd. She was the third princess, Henna Adenka, the heroine who single-handedly breached the fortress last year. Her appearance caused a major stir, as everyone believed she was on a mission in the southern continent. The biggest question now was, why was she here? Henna Adenka slowly climbed the steps and faced Carmen directly. Carmen snarled, "Why are you here? What have you come to do? To aid Vincent?" Carmen sneered, issuing a threat. "It seems you've forgotten my warning, Henna. Even if something happens to Laurent Helaim." But Henna simply smiled confidently, cutting him off. "Helaim will be safe." She explained that she had made a pact with the powerful force Yonggrim. Now, dragonfolk soldiers were guarding Lord Laurent's manor. Henna warned, "If you dare threaten Lord Laurent, be prepared to become Yonggrim's enemy." Henna stepped onto the final step, level with Carmen, and proclaimed loudly, "Of course I won't sit idly by either, Lord Carmen." Blocked on every side by Henna, Carmen could only glare in anger. He hissed, "You dare." After putting Carmen in his place, Henna turned to her still-stunned younger brother and smiled softly. "I stepped in myself. I hope you don't mind, Vincent?" One of Carmen's subordinates cried out in panic. Miss Henna, please don't act so abruptly." But Henna ignored him, facing Vincent and saying, "If you truly disagree, then I have a proposal." Then Henna stood beside Vincent, the two of them facing Carmen and the entire audience. She boldly announced the first clause of the agreement. "The winner of the match between the two of us will earn the right to challenge Lord Carmen." She paused, then said a second, bolder condition. "And, if I lose to Lord Carmen, I will officially support Lord Carmen to become the next head of the family." Henna's declaration exploded through the arena like a bomb, leaving Carmen stunned. The offer was so tempting that Carmen had to consider it. He thought of the succession struggle, of the weary stalemate with his rival Dea. In Carmen's mind, a scale of power appeared. He realized that if he could pull Henna's faction over to his side here, the balance would tip entirely in his favor. A cruel, greedy smile spread across Carmen's face. He thought, the succession match won't even need to take place. I'll win by default. I can defeat that troublesome Dea. Then he considered the other scenario. Even if Vincent wins, he'll be exhausted after fighting Hina. Then I can toy with a spent Vincent and accidentally kill him. Realizing he would benefit either way, Carmen no longer hesitated. He curled his lips into a gruesome smile and said, very well, he arrogantly announced to everyone. I will only fight the victor. Do as you please. Carmen's subordinate frantically called his name, trying to prevent this rash decision. But Carmen had decided. He completely ignored his subordinate's desperate pleas. He turned back and glared in warning. Carmen's men could only grit their teeth in helplessness, watching events unfold in an unexpected way. Henna turned to look at her brother and calmly said, so it's decided then. Vincent was silent, a bead of sweat running down his cheek. His eyes were heavy and conflicted. He did not want this battle to happen. A referee stepped into the center of the arena, raised his hand, and shouted, from this moment, the match between Vincent Adenka and Hina Adenka will begin. Hina looked at her brother. She knew this place was about to become a stage of humiliation for herself. Vincent himself did not want this, he told himself. I know one day I'll have to defeat Hina to free myself. But I've never wanted to disgrace her by overthrowing her in front of everyone. Vincent's gaze dropped, he said painfully. I had hoped you wouldn't step out, sister. Recognizing the hesitation in his eyes, Hina looked at him, her voice both gentle and firm. There's no need for that expression. Keep going forward. Surpass me, to prove to the Council of Elders, to show Carmen, and beyond that, reach for the dream I've always believed you could. Hina's words ran through Vincent like an electric shock, extinguishing all doubt. His gaze sharpened and hardened. To further steel her brother's resolve, Hannah decided to repeat a promise from long ago. Hannah recalled a distant memory. That day, at the Francis Art Gallery, I said I would surpass you and take on the role of a warrior in your stead. At that moment, a promise etched itself into memory. Back in the present, Hina was enveloped in a stream of blue power. She stared directly into her brother's eyes and asked, Vincent, right now, can you surpass me? No longer hesitating, Vincent tightened his sculpted weapon as a purple energy flared around him. With fiery, determined eyes, he replied, I'll prove it. In the stands, a green-haired female reporter shouted to the camera operator, This is the battle of the monument Hina Adenka. Don't miss a single hair or poor record everything. The cameraman hurriedly answered, Yes, ma'am. But then the reporter suddenly froze and exclaimed in surprise, Huh? She couldn't believe her eyes. Amid the intense tension, Hina was smiling. The monument. She's smiling? The referee stood at the center of the arena and gave the final signal. The two siblings stood at opposite ends, ready for the fateful battle. Contestants, prepare. The referee shouted, Begin. The moment the call ended, Hina's spear of light lunged straight toward Vincent. Her power exploded violently. A massive blue energy condensed into a razor-sharp crystal blade. She charged forward, thrusting the blade directly at Vincent. Vincent only realized the terrifying speed of his sister when her energy blade was already in front of him. He thought in shock, too fast. Hina smiled and taunted him, But I won't let you surpass me that easily, so you'd better show me everything you've got. Hina unleashed her full power, summoning her ultimate technique. Mad Sculptor, Mycelian Ash, a massive, exquisitely crafted sword of light. Hina struck relentlessly with all her strength, shouting, I'll pour every ounce of my power into this. Then she unleashed her ultimate blow, Bas Relief. The dazzling strike descended, creating an earth-shattering explosion. Vincent leapt aside in time to evade it. A horrific explosion erupted, its powerful blast shaking the entire arena. After Hina's opening strike, she lunged forward and drove her sword in without mercy. Vincent tilted his head in time to dodge. He gave a crooked smile and said to his sister, You're still so serious about everything, aren't you, Hina? In response to her brother, Hina tightened her grip on the hilt coldly and said, I told you, if I held back, the council elders would criticize me. Vincent lay on the ground with a sword pointed straight at him. It seemed he was beaten, but he calmly said, Then I have no choice. And at that moment a powerful surge of magic began to flow from his hands. Sensing a familiar yet strange energy, Hina was astonished. She widened her eyes, unable to believe what she was feeling. Instantly, a colossal, thunderous explosion burst from Vincent's position, forming a radiant sphere of energy. Seeing Vincent's thunder technique, Hina merely offered a smug smile. It seemed she had anticipated it and felt pleased that her brother's power had improved dramatically. Vincent stood amid a wasteland left by the blast. Hina muttered that a single strike of his had wiped out all her sculptures. Even so, she showed no flinch. Seeing her brother still standing, she knew what to do and immediately charged, swinging her sword with lightning speed so he would have no time to prepare. Facing his sister's attack, Vincent remained silent, his gaze sharpened as if analyzing each of Hina's movements. Hina used her terrifying speed to create countless clones, surrounding Vincent. She vowed to strike relentlessly, denying him any chance to counterattack. In the stands, a red-haired analyst watched the match intently. She witnessed Hina's lightning-fast sword lines covering the entire arena. The red-haired analyst couldn't hide her amazement. She exclaimed, "Wow, incredible." Below, Vincent calmly parried each of Hina's attacks with pinpoint perfection. Suddenly, a girl with green hair appeared from behind, startling the red-haired analyst. The green-haired girl apologized in embarrassment and introduced herself as reporter Maria. She asked the analyst to explain the match because she couldn't understand what was happening. The red-haired analyst awkwardly agreed. After observing, the analyst offered her initial assessment. "This match is more one-sided than I expected." Meanwhile, in another corner of the stands, Carmen, both siblings' rival, was also watching. He muttered that if Damien among the 8 siblings specialized in fire, then Hina specialized in speed. Carmen continued his analysis, claiming that with superior speed, Hina had complete initiative and someone like Vincent couldn't defend. His words seemed confirmed as Vincent struggled to block his sister's rain of blades. However, Carmen had a different plan in mind. He flashed a sinister smile, thinking that after Hina's victory he would strike her down to move one step closer to becoming head of the family. Reporter Maria said sadly, "I understand." As expected, the age gap makes the match unfair. Hearing that, the red-haired analyst immediately countered, "No, actually it's the opposite." She explained in astonishment that since the initial surprise strike, Hina hadn't landed a single additional hit. Realizing the same, Carmen concluded that this meant Vincent was completely reading Hina's movements. At the same time, Vincent easily used his hand to deflect his sister's attack. The moment Vincent fully grasped all of Hina's movements, he immediately turned the tables, using a purple energy blade to stop her attack. Both Hina and Carmen showed expressions of horror. Hina's initiative, born of her superior speed, had completely ended. Vincent smiled confidently and declared, "Now, the initiative is mine." With that, he unleashed his technique, Heavy Blade Tali Sasi. A gigantic purple energy blade rose from the ground and lunged straight at Hina. Taken aback by the counter, Hina hurriedly raised her sword to block, but before the absolute power of the Heavy Blade Tali Sasi, her sword shattered into pieces. Hina froze, unable to believe her eyes. Watching the fragments of her sword fall, a memory suddenly flooded Hina's mind, recalling someone's words from the past. The scene flashed back to the past. During a training session, Carmen had easily parried Hina's attack and cut her sword clean off. He looked at the still immature Hina and said, "Hina, you have a long way to go with skills like that." Carmen continued to belittle Hina, saying she couldn't even dream of becoming head of the family. From then on, she strove relentlessly, thinking that if she became stronger, the headship would be hers. She believed it was a coveted privilege everyone fought for, something one had to attain for success. With that thought, she resolved to fulfill the mission of the Adenka family. But that fateful day changed her thinking, the day at the Francis Art Gallery. Vincent had declared loudly that he was ready to surpass everyone, be it their father or Samian. It was his confident attitude in saying what he wanted that pushed her to completely change her own mindset. Back in the present, Hina looked at Vincent and thought to herself, while others aimed only for the headship, Vincent was the only one looking beyond it. Hina silently admitted that such an ambitious goal suited Vincent. At that moment, Vincent tightened his grip on the sword, his eyes burning with resolve to face her. As a direct heir, pride would not let her back down. "I will not yield easily," Hina roared. She unleashed all her magic. A colossal celestial guardian in the shape of a warrior goddess appeared behind her, gathering energy for the final decisive strike. Julian, Vincent's loyal guardian, shouted anxiously, "Hina's magic is surging." But Vincent remained calm. He knew Hina would use a single blow to finish the match. Vincent turned to Julian and said, "Then we should respond in kind." Julian, a warm memory flooded back. The newly finished painting, with ink droplets still glistening at the tip of the brush. In the memory, Young Vincent rejoiced at being given that painting, Henna gently ruffling his hair, a scene of utter tenderness. Buoyed by Julian's vigorous encouragement, Vincent smiled and prepared to unleash his strongest attack, his purple energy blade blazing brightly. The two siblings lunged at each other. Their ultimate techniques collided, creating a peak confrontation between two colossal streams of energy. In the stands, the red-haired analyst watched breathlessly. She knew this strike would decide everything. Below the stands, the two opponents looked at each other with tender yet determined eyes. Swinging the heavy blade, Vincent reflected on the journey so far, on Forsytine's blessing and the fruit of paradise. He knew he couldn't be standing here today without that priceless help. As Hina charged with her final attack, his thoughts continued. Because of her, he saved someone precious and freed himself from days of aimless wandering. This sincere gratitude fueled his decisive strike. The two attacks collided, producing a blinding explosion of light. In that moment, Vincent silently offered his heartfelt thanks. A massive energy blast erupted, engulfing the entire arena in a sea of purple light. The power of Vincent's blade proved superior. It easily pierced Hina's defense and heated the arena like never before. A quick, razor-sharp slash streaked through, and Hina's celestial guardian shattered under Vincent's overwhelming force. Hina had no time to dodge, utterly helpless against her brother's attack. Her armor cracked and broke, unable to withstand the final strike's impact. A cut across her shoulder began to bleed. As the dust settled, Hina knelt on the ground, completely defeated. Vincent stood tall in the distance as the ultimate victor. Seeing Henna wounded, Julian rushed to Vincent in panic and shouted, "Big brother, she's hurt. Help her, please." But Vincent coldly replied, "No." Vincent explained that helping Hina now would be an insult to the pride of a warrior like her. Hearing this, the bitterness of defeat on her face gradually faded, giving way to an odd serenity. Contrary to expectations, a gentle smile spread across Hina's lips. She looked up and stared straight ahead, replying to her grown-up brother, "I'm happy. Finally, the day you truly surpass me has come." Vincent turned his back, his silhouette long across the ruined arena. He declared, "I will become even stronger, stronger than anyone." Despite defeat and injury, Henna still smiled proudly, a satisfied smile at witnessing her brother's growth. She thought proudly, "This is my brother, Vincent." At the same time, the referee's voice rang out, announcing that Miss Hina had conceded defeat. The referee raised his hand and declared the winner of this duel, Vincent Adenka. After the fierce battle with Vincent, Henna Adenka lay unconscious. Fortunately, her wound had stopped bleeding and would soon heal. Vincent, having just won, coldly ordered the monks to take Hina away carefully. He stood on the ruined arena, his gaze fixed on another target. Vincent's eyes grew icy and resolute. He knew his true opponent had nowhere left to run. In the center of the arena, Vincent proclaimed loudly that he had proven his worth. His martial power had now surpassed the level of a fortress-class warrior. With a defiant expression and an arrogant smile, Vincent shouted, calling out the name of the one he wanted to face. "Come out, Lord Carmen." In response to the challenge, a massive greatsword suddenly descended from the sky, plunging into the ground right in front of Vincent. A voice rang out, mocking that there was no need to shout like that. A hand gripped the sword's hilt, asserting its presence. The one who had been called was right here. The shadow of the newcomer fell over Vincent. It was Lord Carmen, with long silver hair and a towering frame. He repeated the promise from 2 years before. Carmen's face showed obvious malice and contempt. He snarled, reiterating his old threat that he would send Vincent back to his lowly mother. Vincent turned and ordered Revan, the match referee, to begin immediately. Revan bowed and complied. The two opponents faced each other on the arena. Carmen taunted, suggesting that Vincent seemed to have forgotten what he had said before. Vincent did not flinch. He gritted his teeth and declared that because Carmen had insulted his birth mother, Lord Carmen would pay dearly. Revan, dressed in red, raised the white flag high, signaling both sides to prepare. Tension filled the arena. When Revan shouted, "Begin," the duel for honor officially erupted. Immediately, both Vincent and Carmen charged at each other without hesitation. Carmen spread a savage smile, full of confidence in his power, while Vincent faced him with blazing eyes, steadfast and unafraid. Clang! Their swords collided, sending off dazzling sparks, signaling a earth-shattering battle. Not just a clash of weapons, the mana of both exploded, forming a gigantic purple energy sphere between them. The force from the collision shattered the arena's ground into pieces, revealing the terrible power of both. A massive energy blast spread across the arena, creating a horrifying pressure. The spectators in the stands were affected as well. Two trainees screamed in pain as their bodies felt torn by the dense mana. Others were astonished. Just one clash of swords and mana had produced such immense force. It was unbelievable. The female commander with green hair was also stunned. She could only utter two words: truly amazing. As an analyst, the female commander turned to ask her assistant about Lord Carmen's blessing, but it seemed even their side lacked information about his abilities, and the answer she received was astonishing. None. This left her bewildered. Such overwhelming power came from no blessing. The green-haired commander explained that Carmen's terrifying strength did not stem from any blessing, but from pure martial skill. A red-haired analyst confirmed it was his innate talent and concluded that in a head-to-head confrontation, even Vincent would struggle. Indeed, Carmen continuously overwhelmed Vincent with storm-like force. He attacked like a tempest, a mad smile on his lips, while Vincent gritted his teeth to defend. Vincent could only lift his sword to block, completely driven into a defensive stance against Carmen's earth-shattering assaults. In the stands, two men who appeared to be Carmen's subordinates scoffed. They believed that although Carmen might lose to Dea, he was on a completely different level from Vincent. An elder watched the match, thinking to himself that ordinarily this should be an overwhelming victory for Carmen. However, a glimmer of hope shone in his eyes. He thought of Vincent's sword, and believed it might halt Carmen's ambition. Meanwhile, the arena continued to shake and crumble under Carmen's terrifying power. Vincent kept moving, dodging the attacks. He admitted inwardly that Carmen truly possessed strength befitting a house lord. He assessed that Carmen's swordsmanship and mana control clearly surpassed his own. If he were the Vincent from 2 years ago, he would not have withstood a single blow. But the current Vincent was different. His gaze hardened, and a plan began to form in his mind. If that's the case then, Carmen unleashed another powerful strike, but Vincent quickly evaded, leaving the ground shattered in his wake. Seeing Vincent only dodge, Carmen angrily jeered. After all your boasting, is running away the best you can do? What a pathetic performance. Carmen appeared disappointed, thinking the match was over since his opponent only knew how to flee. Suddenly, Vincent smiled confidently. That's a line I should be saying, he retorted. A perceptive spectator noticed. Lord Carmen's strikes are only cutting through air, aren't they? Provoked, Carmen roared. Don't worry, this time I'll take your head. At that moment, a thum sounded, signaling a shift in the situation. Carmen froze when he heard the sound of water. He looked down and was astonished to see water rising around his feet. This is, a knowledgeable observer shouted, recognizing immediately. This is Vincent's water blessing. It turned out that while dodging, Vincent had been secretly stalling to draw up groundwater. His plan was finally revealed. Vincent pointed at Carmen, his eyes glowing with absolute confidence. He declared, "Now, this battlefield belongs to me." With that, a massive column of water erupted from beneath his feet. The entire dry arena quickly turned into a sea of water. The spectators panicked. Water is swirling across the arena. Lord Carmen is trapped. Isn't this too dangerous? A gigantic whirlpool formed, gripping Carmen tightly and neutralizing his advantage in physical strength. Carmen swung his sword wildly, trying to hack through the water that bound him. However, his brute physical force was useless against Vincent's fluid technique. Soaked and restrained, Carmen's arrogance did not diminish. He snarled with contempt. With this little water trick, do you think you can defeat me? Vincent sneered, warning Carmen that after playing with water, he should watch out for electric shock. Saying that, he unleashed a powerful bolt of lightning into the surrounding water. Carmen realized Vincent's true plan in horror. He roared in anger and pain as the electricity ran through his body. A massive lightning pillar struck, combined with the water to create a wide-area attack, submerging Carmen in an ocean of electricity. The combined force of Forsetti's power and the Thunder Giant struck Carmen. At this point, Carmen had no ability to defend himself. Sensing the moment had come, Vincent's eyes turned cold. He decided to finish the fight right there. Vincent channeled all his strength, intending to link all his blessings into a single strike. Energy chains wrapped around his sword. The ultimate attack was unleashed, producing a blinding burst of light that hurtled straight toward Carmen. All the blessings Vincent possessed from the Wolf King and the Water God to the Thunder Giant King were merged, forming an attack of unimaginable power. The moment they collided, everything seemed to explode. Vincent's powerful strike appeared to have hit its mark perfectly. The entire arena was engulfed by a massive purple energy blast. As the dust cleared, a terrifying silence fell over the arena. The spectators, including the female commander and the analyst, held their breath and watched. What the hell is happening? they wondered. The red-haired analyst stammered, her face showing utter disbelief. Impossible. Even Revan, who had witnessed countless matches, cried out in horror. No way. This can't be. The confident smile on Vincent's face vanished. Through the smoke, he saw an unbelievable sight. Carmen still stood firm, parrying his attack with his sword. Around Carmen now swirled a blazing orange-gold aura. He was unharmed after Vincent's full-power strike. Vincent was utterly shocked. Sweat began to pour down his forehead. How is this possible? He couldn't believe his eyes. Within the fiery halo, the form of a Skull King appeared behind Carmen. Vincent recoiled in horror as he realized the truth. Carmen, you. Could it be you're enveloped by the Skull King's blessing? Continuing the battle, Vincent was stunned to see his opponent, Carmen, also using the Little King's blessing, a skill unique to him. Vincent froze, unable to believe his eyes. How could Carmen use his power? They crashed into each other, swordplay and magic colliding violently. The fight was tense and evenly matched. Carmen looked at his glowing hand and smirked. He realized the ability was not only defensive but also amplified strength, more useful than he had thought. Vincent roared in anger, demanding to know how Carmen could use the Little King's power. Carmen replied confidently that Vincent would be even more surprised, then lunged forward with terrifying speed. Carmen went on to use another of Vincent's skills, this time the Thunder Giant. He channeled the giant's power into his sword, creating a lightning strike. A horrific thunderous explosion engulfed the arena floor, its force causing the whole Colosseum to shake. In the stands, the spectators, including a bearded man and a young woman, were aghast and had no idea what was happening. Vincent was blasted backward. He screamed in panic as he realized it was his own technique. Vincent hit the ground, still in disbelief. He couldn't understand how Carmen could wield both the Little King's power and the Thunder Giant. Carmen taunted Vincent, asking if he really thought Carmen had been idle for the past 2 years. Finally, Carmen revealed his secret. The trait he had gained was imitation, a power he acquired 2 years earlier on the Pirate Isles from the owner of the obsidian chest. Julian, a companion of Vincent, was also astonished. He hadn't expected Carmen to obtain that god's blessing. Vincent turned to ask Julian about that god. Julian explained it was an evil deity worshipped by pirates. He had once tried to gain its blessing but had given up. According to legend, the sea's cruel god issued a challenge. Anyone who coveted his power must come to him, and the price to pay was only one life. But no formidable challengers came forward, for they feared the nameless evil god. Because of that cowardice, the deity prepared a blessing as bait. The scene shifted to Carmen's flashback. Amid a raging storm, he faced the pirate god and was told that the god's power demanded a price. The skull god set the condition: drown 100 sailors to the depths. Then, as payment, he would grant one of the many powers in his treasure chest. The god laughed horribly, asking if he was truly prepared to pay such a price. Without hesitation, Carmen decided to set sail. The woman traveling with Carmen asked what he intended. He answered that he wanted the power to crush those who had scorned him, her, his father, and even Dia. With eyes full of ambition and malice, Carmen believed that the skull could grant him the strength he had long desired. He was determined to obtain it at any cost, and that cost was the lives of the desperate sailors crying for help in the freezing water. At the end of the flashback, the scene returned to Vincent's disgusted face. He could not accept that someone would coldly sacrifice lives for power. Rage boiling over, Vincent shouted straight at Carmen. Instead of using power to protect others, you kill for greed. Aren't you ashamed to call yourself a warrior? Facing Vincent's fury, Carmen merely smirked arrogantly, seeming utterly unrepentant. He said calmly, "So you know about this power after all." Then he began to gather energy, taunting, "But even if you know, so what?" With that, Carmen launched a powerful attack, asserting that knowing his secret made no difference at all. Vincent had to continuously fend off Carmen's relentless attacks. Worse, Carmen even copied his forging skill. Not stopping there, Carmen used the Galaxy Wanderer, one of Vincent's strongest skills, leaving him utterly shocked. A terrifying explosion occurred, the ground violently shaking under the force of Carmen's strike. Vincent was pushed backward. He couldn't believe that the attack had been one of his own ultimate techniques. Carmen continued to perform another technique, Amelun's central sword skill, as if to prove he had copied everything. Mid-battle, Vincent began to reason. He believed such an ability couldn't activate without conditions. There had to be a trigger for imitation. Vincent suddenly recalled the previous duel. He remembered his opponent being hit. A flash of insight lit his mind. Could it be? Then Vincent realized. To imitate a skill, The opponent must have been struck by that skill at least once. As if reading Vincian's thoughts, Carmen gave a smug smile and confirmed, "That's right. And you were kind enough to mix all your abilities together and attack me." Vincian froze. He recognized his fatal mistake. Everything was such a mess. Vincian bitterly thought that, truthfully, Carmen had now become him a different version with all his skills copied. But Carmen denied that with a disturbingly wicked grin. He growled, his body wrapped in blue electricity. "No, because I stand on a higher level than you," Carmen shouted, proclaiming himself far superior to Vincian. In response, Vincian gathered his power, ready for a direct confrontation. Two colossal forces surged toward each other, creating a cataclysmic collision. In the moment of impact, both their eyes showed resolve and astonishment at the other's strength. But Vincian still had an ace. He unleashed a completely new skill Carmen had never seen, King's Chain Link. Vincian's sword became encased in blazing golden chains. He combined it with another new move, Twin Cleave, Heavy Scythe, producing an unprecedentedly powerful strike. Vincian's new attack faced Carmen's power head-on. A massive explosion of energy once again shook the arena. The outcome of their clash remained undecided. After the collision, Vincian noticed an important detail. Carmen only imitated his skills without using others' blessings. This indicated that imitation definitely had limits, either in duration or number of uses. There had to be a weakness, but to find that weakness, he had to survive first. Vincian looked up to see Carmen hovering midair, surrounded by lightning. His adaptation speed was terrifyingly fast, and an even more devastating attack seemed about to be unleashed. The arena sky suddenly darkened. Black clouds gathered and thunder began to roll. Huge bolts of lightning descended, signaling an imminent strike. With a sinister smile, Carmen unleashed the full power of the Thunder Giant, shouting, "Great Thunder!" In the stands, Julian and his companions were pushed back by the pressure of Carmen's power. They couldn't believe he could release so much strength. A colossal lightning strike, the Thunder Giant's ultimate attack, hurtled straight toward Vincian. Facing the destructive blow, Vincian realized that blocking or dodging directly would be too dangerous. He decided to face it head-on. The gem on the sword's pommel glowed, readying a counterattack. Vincian unleashed a barrage of purple energy orbs. He decided the best course was to use another skill to nullify Carmen's attack. Vincian's energy orbs flew straight into Carmen's lightning, creating a spectacular clash between two opposing forces. Carmen watched the scene with a maniacal look. He taunted Vincian to use his strange sword path, believing it would lead to Vincian's destruction. Chapter 155 ends with Vincian, sweat streaming, yet eyes full of determination, facing the greatest challenge he has ever known. Carmen laughed arrogantly, provoking Vincian. He believed the strange sword path Vincian was following would be what led him to defeat. Vincian froze, unable to believe his eyes. Just now, did the enemy really laugh? Carmen's attitude made him sense that something was wrong. He gritted his teeth, realizing the opponent's true intention. So this was his plan, to provoke him into revealing all his cards. Vincian concentrated his power. A powerful radiance emanated from his body, cracking the ground around him. Carmen clicked his tongue, feigning regret. He looked at Vincian from afar, who was shrouded by a giant energy specter, and taunted him. He continued to provoke, saying that if Vincian swung his sword and even nicked him, but Vincian knew he couldn't use his special move recklessly. He understood that doing so would be like handing his ultimate technique over to Carmen, and just as Vincian feared, Carmen copied all of his blessings. Now, Vincian couldn't use his strange sword path for fear of it being stolen. Carmen declared that Vincian had no choice left, then rushed forward with a barrage of attacks, putting Vincian in a difficult position. Vincian struggled to defend against Carmen's storm of strikes. He was knocked back and skidded along the ground. Despite being at a disadvantage, Vincian did not falter. He dropped to one knee, gripping his sword tightly, asserting that he was gradually mastering the blessings and would soon surpass Carmen's skills. Hearing this, Carmen only answered with a mocking aha, as if watching a farce. He smirked and began experimenting with the powers he had just copied. He wondered how fast the combination of Galaxy Wanderer and Dwarf King would be. Vincian could only watch in silence, sweat streaming down his temples. The enemy was using his own power against him, even combining them creatively. Carmen explained that each blessing was strong on its own, but when combined, they became even stronger. Then he unleashed a terrifying force, forged from the stolen blessings, overwhelming Vincian. Vincian was astonished to think that in just minutes, Carmen had mastered 4 blessings. It was an incredible talent. Seeing this, Vincian was furious and pointed at Carmen, questioning why someone with such talent would follow the dark path and crave that corrupt power. Carmen only sneered, claiming Vincent was just like his father, spouting meaningless, outdated words. Confronting the other's ideals, Carmen roared that victory alone makes a warrior. As long as you win at all costs, that's enough. He lunged forward, asserting that in the end, only the victor's record would remain. Looking at Carmen's demeanor, Vincent felt despair. He wondered if he would once again kneel before this method. In his most desperate moment, a familiar voice rang in Vincent's head, urging him not to give up. Just as Vincent felt despair, a familiar voice sounded, questioning why he would give up so easily. It was Elio, the teammate who had always stood by him, appearing like a phantom to remind him of their promise to correct their shared past. Elio's words were like a splash of cold water on Vincent's troubled mind. He snapped out of his despair, and then Julian's voice continued to ring in his head. Julian's voice kept echoing, reminding Vincent that the brother he knew never gave up. Even when he was a useless weakling, he had not quit. Julian's words ran through Vincent like an electric shock. He whispered his comrade's name, his gaze no longer despairing. A faint smile spread across Vincent's lips. He whispered, "Yes, the battle was not over yet." Regaining his composure, Vincent suggested to Julian that they use that technique. Julian was surprised and hesitant, since the technique was still unfinished. But Vincent simply asked whether they had any other option. Faced with Vincent's determination, Julian agreed. The two decided to test the unfinished technique as a final trump card. The scene suddenly shifted into a deep mental space, where only Vincent, Julian, and glittering constellations remained. Vincent asked Julian whether these stars held any special meaning. Julian replied that he had been thinking the same thing. Both of them felt a strange familiarity from these constellations. Suddenly, another voice rang out, asking if they thought it resembled the sword path of the special strike. A woman with horns and a red dress appeared, Annalyn. Vincent recognized her immediately. Annalyn smiled and said that they had finally noticed. Annalyn explained that these constellations were what Master Aslan had left behind. She emphasized that this was his final arrangement. Immediately after, the mental space dissolved, returning them to reality. Back in the arena, Carmen had run out of patience. He bellowed, asking if Vincent had finished muttering to himself. Carmen decided to end the fight. He would concentrate all the techniques he had copied into a single strike. He gathered his power, forming a gigantic red energy greatsword, and declared he would cleave Vincent in two. Facing the devastating attack, Vincent did not flinch. He charged straight ahead, telling himself this was the only chance, even if the technique would be stolen. Watching Vincent's action, Carmen sneered at his foolishness for daring to rush into death alone. He thought Vincent had finally gone mad. But deep down, Vincent knew timing was everything. He needed to create an opening and finish the fight immediately. Two world-shaking forces collided, producing an earth-shattering explosion. The tremendous blast from the two techniques made the entire arena tremble. Though pushed back, Carmen laughed maniacally, shouting that he would crush Vincent and split him in two. Vincent braced himself, vowing to endure until Julian found the way. He gritted his teeth and focused on the new technique Annalyn had passed on. It was the Holy Sword Strike, created by Master Aslan, a technique infused with divine power. The secret of this technique lay in that it was a sword path saturated with divine power. Because of that nature, it opened up an unprecedented possibility. That possibility was that a new god, like Julian, could himself create an entirely new sword path. To Carmen's astonishment, Julian raised his hand, unleashed his divine power, and drew a brilliant path of light right before Vincent. Vincent's attack sped along the sword path Julian had just created. Carmen realized in horror, wondering how Vincent's strike could travel along the blade like that. At the decisive moment, Vincent and Julian shouted in unison, "Now!" Their eyes both flashed with determination. Vincent's sword attack and Julian's creative sword path occurred simultaneously. Julian from above formed the path of light. Vincent below followed that blade, a perfectly combined strike that pierced through all of Carmen's defenses. At the moment the technique struck, both Vincent and Carmen showed surprise on their faces. One was astonished by his own power, the other by an unbelievable defeat. A blinding light enveloped Carmen. The technique had hit its mark. The power of the attack was so immense that it produced a massive explosion, engulfing the entire arena. In the mental space, Annalyn pondered a name for the technique. She suggested the end and destruction, but then she playfully brushed it off, claiming that the end and destruction was a name that belonged to her. Carmen's giant energy blade shattered into pink crystal fragments, raining down. A little disappointing, but that was it. Annalyn decided. Call it the Transcendent Sword Strike. Vincent stood firm amid the shower of crystals, becoming the victor. Dazed, Carmen couldn't comprehend what had happened. He had seen no sign of a sword path, yet the attack had appeared out of nowhere. Vincent explained that normally, with all the copied power, this would have been Carmen's victory, but Vincent possessed a power the other could never imitate. It was the power derived from Julian's existence. Julian, looking happy and relieved, exclaimed, He did it." The referee, visibly stunned, stammered as he announced the winner. The stands erupted. All teammates and friends cheered at the spectacular victory. The winner of this match is Vincent Adenka. A henchman was carefully lifting an arm. Scene cuts to a lavish hall. Carmen storms in furious, followed by two henchmen. He grits his teeth and mutters curses in helpless rage. His face shows intense bitterness. He roars that he will not accept this defeat and vows to kill Vincent at any cost. Suddenly, he startles as he senses someone's presence behind him. That person is none other than his father, the patriarch of the family, a commanding man with a cold gaze and a dignified beard. His arrival makes the son exclaim, "Father." The patriarch announces that it will be costly to heal the arm severed by Vincent's sword. He orders them to find a magic stone and summon a high priest. The henchmen obey in unison. However, the father hesitates, as if there is a condition tied to the treatment. The patriarch coldly declares that the treatment will proceed only after the investigation into the origin of the assassins is complete. Carmen's face pales, apparently implicated in the matter. Meanwhile, at the arena, the crowd is cheering excitedly. A reporter is trying to seize the opportunity for an exclusive, but a colleague is quicker, holding a freshly printed newspaper. The pipe-smoking man exclaims in disbelief at how fast the news has spread. It turns out the culprit behind this is Wind Sound, a figure with green hair. She had quickly spread the news of young Master Vincent's victory everywhere. Wind Sound gives a smug smile. She reveals that the article was written in advance, right when the match began. News of Vincent's victory spreads like a storm, reaching everyone through newspapers distributed far and wide. The headline praises Vincent as a divine leap to lead the next generation. Meanwhile, Carmen, enraged, thrusts his sword into Vincent's picture in the paper. Elder Pitinel, an old man with white hair, is furious. He's so enraged he plants a dagger into the table, cursing Vincent. A blond man wearing glasses tries to counsel him, but Pitinel shows no calm. He yells, demanding that everyone see whether he looks composed. Another speaks up, recounting that Vincent defeated all direct heirs, even the second son, without using a sword. Now, no one can stop Vincent. Their only remaining card is the eccentric second son, a man who acts on whim. The white-haired youth sits in quiet contemplation, seemingly indifferent to the shifting power dynamics. Back at the elders' meeting, Pitinel remains furious. He claims Khan, who nominated Vincent, has taken an unprecedented action, overstepping their influence. That action was the overthrow of their Adenka Council of Elders. Fear and anger are evident on Pitinel's face. Another elder with a scarred face cannot hide his shock and worry at the current situation. The blond man stands and says that given the situation, they have no choice but to see it through to the end. Another elder with a mustache slams his cane on the ground and declares they must bring down that arrogant Vincent. He grits his teeth, eyes full of killing intent, concluding they must eliminate Vincent at any cost. A dark plot against Vincent is decided. Scene shifts to a snow-covered land under the night sky. Vincent reunites with a woman dressed nobly, Lady Adenka, his mother. She congratulates him on his victory but warns that he will face the elders' extreme hatred. She uses a proverb to describe Vincent's situation. The stone that sticks out will surely be struck down, implying those who stand out become targets to be crushed. Vincent merely smirks confidently. He replies that once he's strong enough to wear down those attacks, it won't matter. Seeing his son's confidence and composure, Lady Adenka smiles with satisfaction. She goes on to analyze, predicting that if she's not mistaken, the Council of Elders will soon promote him quickly. Vincent immediately grasps their intent. He says that in return they'll give him an impossible mission, or that the mission itself is a big trap, such a predictable scenario. Lady Adenka grows serious, admonishing her son not to let his guard down. She explains that they possess strategies that have shaped Adenka for 500 years. Even if they've sunk into greed now, their danger remains. Vincent listens intently. His mother advises him to be suspicious of any conditions he encounters during the mission. He replies that he will remember. She places a hand on Vincent's shoulder, confessing that she hadn't intended to intervene in the youth's competition, but with him she couldn't keep herself from doing so. For a moment, his mother's image is reflected in Vincent's eyes. He notices something different. This warmth is unlike the cold memories he once had of his mother. Vincent begins to wonder whether the one treating him kindly is Lady Adenka, the powerful politician, or his mother. He decides to ask her directly. Vincent's blunt question surprises Lady Adenka a little. Sweat beads on her brow. Vincent looks at her with sincere eyes and a gentle smile, saying, I hope it's my mother. After a brief silence, the atmosphere seems to warm. She quietly says, perhaps. Lady Adenka gives a kind smile, confirming to him, it seems that indeed I am your mother. Hearing the answer he hoped for, Vincent smiles happily. The doubts in his heart are lifted. At dawn, signaling a new day, Vincent tells his mother, then, as your son, there are a few things I'd like to ask of you. Their relationship has turned a new page. The next morning, Vincent is walking through the fortress grounds. Suddenly a voice urgently calls his name from behind. It's the female commander of the fortress, a girl with fiery red hair. She rushes up, saying something major has happened. Without explanation, the commander thrusts a scroll of parchment into Vincent's hands, urging him to read it at once. Yet, in complete contrast to her panic, Vincent merely smiles calmly. He says nonchalantly, the Council of Elders must have assigned me a mission, right? Perhaps a condition for that special promotion. Vincent's composure sends a chill through the commander. She hadn't expected him to anticipate the council's move. Vincent only smiles, explaining that he got a tip from his mother. Then he leisurely unfurls the scroll to read its contents. However, when he reads the mission details, Vincent's eyes show a hint of surprise. The assigned task is to eliminate the monsters that have invaded the snowy village of Jillian in the Tursan Range. Attached is a note. Upon completing the mission, Vincent will be officially promoted to Fortress Warrior. The seal of the Adenka Council of Elders is prominently at the bottom of the page. The title Fortress Warrior is the bait the council has offered. Vincent's blonde assistant remarks that the council is acting much bolder than expected. Vincent agrees, his expression hardening. He knows what this means. This mission will be even more dangerous. The image of the Grand Elder appears with a sly smile, confirming this is a deadly trap. Meanwhile, at the council meeting, an elder says that Vincent now holds a power they cannot control, and they must find a way to deal with it. Hearing this, the Grand Elder merely curls his lip in a contemptuous smile. A power you can't control? He bellows, so what of it? His eyes flash with ferocity. An opponent who cannot be subdued by force? Then, the scene abruptly shifts to a desolate, snow-covered mountain. A villager is shown desperate and terrified in the blizzard, revealing the real danger at Jillian Village. The Grand Elder's voice rings out viciously. We will bring him down by the methods of the Council of Elders. A fierce tiger appears, symbolizing his cunning and cruelty. The old man grits his teeth, declaring he will show that brat Vincent how the Council of Elders fights. An uneven confrontation of schemes and traps is about to begin. After settling everything in Adenka, before leaving, Vincent went to see his mother to make a few requests. His mother and the others traveled to a breathtaking place with an astonishingly high mana concentration. Even Master Craftsman Hansen was amazed that the area had enough energy for grass to grow on snow-capped peaks. Vincent's mother was also stunned. Vincent's first request was that his mother keep the remains of his benefactor, Annalyn, in a safe place. Annalyn's remains were the gigantic dragon skeleton standing before them. This skeleton would play an important role in the future. Vincent also asked his mother to allow Master Craftsman Hansen free access to them. It seemed he had a major plan. His second request was to send the people he had mentioned to Dragonwood, a mystical and ancient place. The two mentioned were Selby, a girl who dreamed of becoming a historian, and Revan, the heir of a clan that preserves records. Both were astonished and overjoyed to be welcomed as friends of young Master Vincent. A leader of the Dragonkin stepped forward to greet them and announced that the Dragonkin would help preserve history in written form. With a radiant smile, she welcomed them to Dragonwood and said all preparations were complete. Vincent's plan was unfolding perfectly. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to a snow-covered mountain area. Vincent and his companions were heading toward a village blanketed in snow in the Tursan Range. Accompanying him were Sari and Wilson. The three were moving deep into a dangerous area where fearsome monsters roamed. Their destination was the village of Jillian, a place in peril. Jillian was a village formed from many small hamlets and once protected by a magic barrier. But recently the barrier had weakened, and monster attacks had grown more frequent. Meanwhile, a group of trainees sent ahead were assessing the situation. Several small hamlets had been destroyed, and villagers were evacuating to the larger central village. Another trainee pointed at the map and said there was something unusual. It seemed they had just discovered a worrying detail. They realized that 3 trainees had been sent as a vanguard but were now unaccounted for. At that moment, a monster suddenly appeared. The monster lunged unexpectedly at the white-haired female trainee. She had no time to react to the lightning-fast attack. Fortunately, she barely dodged the strike. However, the situation remained extremely dangerous. Though she avoided the fatal blow, she was still injured in the leg. The wound caused her to fall and left her unable to move. The giant monster approached the wounded girl. She could only lie there, facing imminent death. In a desperate moment, she realized something even more terrifying. Not just one, but two monsters. Another, even larger beast had appeared behind her, cutting off every escape route. As the two monsters lunged simultaneously, the trainee knew she had no chance left. As the two monsters charged, the female trainee could only close her eyes in despair, thinking her life had come to an end. But just before the monster's claws could reach her, a sound rang out, halting the attack. The girl opened her eyes in bewilderment, not understanding what had happened. A figure had appeared before her from nowhere. It was Vincent. He had arrived in time and effortlessly stopped the ogre's devastating strike with one hand, encased in a hexagonal magical barrier. Vincent turned to the girl and coldly asked if she was all right. To him, blocking the giant monster's attack seemed like a trivial matter. Marielle, the trainee who had been rescued, was still in shock. She could not believe someone could stop an ogre's attack so easily. Observing the situation, Vincent frowned and called out to his companion Seri to join the battle. Immediately, Seri launched a giant fireball straight at the ogre. The attack created a massive explosion, engulfing the monster in a sea of flames. Its power made Marielle scream in terror. Then Seri flew up and used her ice magic to strike the remaining ogre. Seri cried out in joy, thinking she had defeated the beast. But her joy was short-lived as the ogre roared in anger. Her attack had only wounded it slightly. Just as the ogre was about to counterattack, Vincent acted again. Purple magical butterflies appeared, signaling a powerful skill. With a graceful slash, Vincent's sword, wrapped in violet energy, easily pierced the ogre's defenses. He used transcendent swordsmanship, an ultimate technique, generating a colossal beam of energy that shot into the monster and finished it instantly. Marielle could only utter the word amazed as she witnessed Vincent's unimaginable power. After easily eliminating both monsters, Vincent calmly approached Marielle and inquired about her wound. His concern surprised her. Suddenly, Marielle leaped forward and hugged Vincent tightly. Much to his astonishment, both Seri and Wilson could not hide their shock and surprise at the turn of events. Vincent supported the exhausted Marielle. She breathed a sigh of relief, sobbed into his chest, and kept thanking him, saying she would have died without them. Vincent remained silent, his gaze calm yet full of concern. The group stopped to rest. They lit a fire to warm themselves and had dinner. They gathered around the fire, and Wilson kindly offered warm water to everyone. The girl, Marielle, smiled warmly as she accepted the cup, thanked him profusely, and lightly praised that Vincent's retinue was very kind. Wilson couldn't help blushing deeply. Marielle's beauty and kindness moved him, but he also froze when he noticed something familiar about her. Vincent sat beside her, observing her posture. He was certain she was one of the Vanguard trainees who had gone missing. This girl was Marielle, a third-rank trainee. She was famed as the most beautiful among the Red Fortress trainees, and the number of people who called her their first love had reached double digits. Countless trainees had fallen for her beauty, and that was why. She was nicknamed First Love Marielle. Her smile could melt even the iciest heart. Aware of Marielle's reputation, Wilson could only shake his head in self-doubt, thinking she was on a level far beyond him. Seri watched Wilson awkwardly blowing on the long cold cup of water and felt slightly annoyed by his clumsiness. Moreover, Seri noticed Senior Marielle sitting very close to young Master Vincent, which made her somewhat displeased. Vincent paid no attention to such trifles. He looked at the slain ogre and asked Marielle if it had been the target of their conquest mission. Marielle lowered her head, her expression complicated. She answered vaguely, "We thought so." But Marielle's answer was cut off by a distant voice calling her name. Both Vincent and Seri startled and turned around. One of the newcomers was overjoyed upon seeing the light from the campfire, knowing they had found the right direction. They were the two remaining Vanguard trainees, Brick and Keshin. They sighed in relief upon finding Marielle, one of them even scolding for having worried about her. The two hurried toward the fire, calling Marielle's name. They were stunned to find her sitting with a group of strangers. As they drew near, Vincent's sword suddenly shot forward and slammed into the ground before them as a warning, and the two froze in shock. Marielle looked frightened and slightly puzzled by Vincent's action. Vincent stood between her and the two trainees, his voice menacing. "You." Vincent's eyes flared crimson, full of rage. He growled, a loaded, deadly question. What the hell did you do? In the dead of night, with snow blanketing everything, a group of trainees arrived and were astonished. Before them, amid the desolate mountains, was an oddly peaceful campsite. Keshion and his teammates froze when they saw Vincent, Marielle, and a few others relaxing by the fire. Keshion, a senior trainee with striking blonde hair, gaped in disbelief. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Anger and bafflement showed on his face. Marielle was equally stunned. She couldn't understand why Vincent would act that way. Keshion and his teammates looked skeptical. They turned to each other, speechless at the unbelievable scene. Keshion angrily confronted Vincent. He accused Vincent of acting recklessly and unilaterally, endangering everyone. Contrary to Keshion's anger, Vincent rose calmly. He explained that Keshion had violated the most basic rules taught in the Fortress Handbook. Keshion grew even more furious at Vincent's words. He couldn't accept a rookie daring to lecture him. Keshion pointed at Vincent and shouted, claiming his combat experience far surpassed that of a newcomer like Vincent. Meanwhile, Sarah and another teammate watched silently as the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Keshion continued to spew arrogant words, completely dismissing Vincent and insisting he was the one in the right. After a heated exchange, Keshion smirked confidently and gave a thumbs up. He decided to use force to prove who was stronger. Without hesitation, Keshion grabbed the hilt of the red sword stuck in the snow. With a loud cry, Keshion swung the sword at Vincent. His face looked savage and frenzied. At that moment, a dangerous purple light flashed in Vincent's eyes. He was ready to respond. Vincent easily used his bare hand to stop Keshion's wrist, gently halting the attack. With a skillful martial move, Vincent immediately threw Keshion down, throwing him completely off balance. Keshion's eyes widened in panic. He couldn't believe he had been defeated so easily. Vincent gave Keshion no chance. He used the opponent's own strength to slam him hard onto the cold snow. Keshion only managed a cry of pain. His once arrogant face was now distorted by the humiliating defeat. The cold blade of the sword was pressed against Keshion's face. A slight move could have ended his life. Vincent stood there, imposing, looking down at Keshion sprawled on the ground. He had completely overwhelmed his opponent in an instant. Vincent squinted and warned Keshion that his experience far exceeded anything Keshion could imagine and told him never to act so foolishly again. After the confrontation, the scene shifted to a large central camp called Jillian, where trainees were encamped in the snowy mountains. Inside a cozy building, warm yellow light spilled from a window, where an important conversation was taking place. There, Marielle began to recount her terrifying experience. Contrary to initial assumptions, she said the thing that attacked her was not an ordinary goblin, but a completely different creature. Marielle trembled as she told her story, her face pale with fear. What she encountered wasn't a goblin, but a giant black tiger with blazing eyes that roared and destroyed the entire village. Recalling that horrific moment, Marielle could only clutch her head as the beast's roar still echoed in her ears. She could only squeeze her eyes shut, her body trembling uncontrollably, utterly powerless before the black tiger's strength. Strangely, after destroying the village, the black tiger quietly walked away, leaving Marielle alone amid the ruins and the white snow. It vanished into the swirling blizzard as if it had never appeared. Vincent listened intently to Marielle's story. Beside him was Julian, a small, bespectacled spirit and Vincent's capable assistant. Vincent deduced that this was not an ordinary beast. It was very likely that some beast trainer had brought the soul of a dangerous monster to these mountains. After finishing her story, Marielle was still trembling. She looked up at Vincent with pleading eyes. Vincent coldly replied, "What?" Vincent's red eyes flashed sharply as he analyzed every detail of Marielle's account, trying to find clues. Without waiting for Vincent's agreement, Marielle rested her head on his shoulder and smiled gratefully. "Thank you for saving me." Seeing that intimate moment, Keshion ground his teeth from afar, fury and jealousy flaring in his eyes. Keshion stepped forward, his voice full of malice, demanding Vincent accompany him. He couldn't stand that Marielle was paying attention to Vincent. Vincent replied calmly, "If there's an issue, come to my room and say it." He paid no mind to Keshion's attitude. Vincent's dismissal poured oil on the fire, making Keshion even angrier. Unable to restrain himself, Keshion roared and launched a mana-filled punch at Vincent. But Vincent was faster. His eyes flashed blue, and a vast energy began to emanate. By releasing his mana alone, Vincent generated a staggering pressure that sent Keshion and the others to their knees. Everyone was stunned. They couldn't believe that merely releasing mana could produce such terrifying power. Cold sweat ran down Keshion. His arrogance had vanished, replaced by utter fear. Vincent's shadow loomed over them all. His presence was so imposing no one dared raise their heads. Vincent's expression did not change, cold and authoritative. Then he walked up the stairs and looked down at Keshion kneeling below. The gap in rank was painfully clear. Vincent's eyes turned red again. He warned Keshion that his patience had limits and told him not to act like a child again. Keshion ground his teeth but could only bow his head and accept the bitter truth. The confrontation ended in his total defeat, in both strength and pride. After subduing Keshion, Vincent coldly turned his back and left. He returned to his room behind a closed door, where secret discussions were about to take place. Back in the room, Julian reported to Vincent that everything was quiet and there were no signs of any assassin. Vincent removed his coat, thinking about his mother's warnings and wondering if he had overreacted. Vincent recalled the pressure he had produced, power sufficient to sense any murderous intent within its range. If there had been an assassin, he would have known. Vincent sat on the bed and explained to Julian how to sense killing intent through mana. His sword lay right beside him, always at the ready. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Both Vincent and Julian were surprised. A visitor at this hour? Vincent called for the person outside to enter. They both turned their eyes to the door, waiting to see who it was. The door opened, and Marielle entered in a thin nightgown, carrying a tray of tea. She wore a smile that was both alluring and mysterious. Julian, naturally innocent, immediately blushed and became flustered at Marielle's appearance. Marielle said she had come to thank Vincent and apologize for Keshion's actions, but Vincent remained silent, unmoved by her looks. Vincent narrowed his eyes. He sensed that something was off. His gaze was full of caution. Marielle smiled suggestively, saying that nighttime was the best moment for forging a deeper connection. She moved closer to Vincent, her smile growing more provocative. Clearly, her purpose was more than a simple thank you. Vincent's eyes widened, his alertness spiked. He couldn't understand what Marielle's intentions were. Marielle advanced slowly, each barefoot step seeming to test Vincent's patience. She suddenly placed her hand on Vincent's chest and pushed him back onto the bed. Vincent lay on the bed, completely surprised by Marielle's bold move. He stared at her, trying to guess her true purpose. Before Vincent could react, Marielle straddled him, hands planted on his chest, wearing a knowing, victorious smile. This night promised to be very long. Marielle was on top of Vincent, seductively asking about the scent of the tea and whether he felt his strength being drained. Julian panicked when he heard the word tea. He shouted, "Could it be that she slipped something into the tea?" Marielle flashed a wicked smile, bearing a fang, and said that soon she would look even more attractive to Vincent. She leaned close to Vincent, assuring him she wouldn't harm him, while Vincent remained silent. And in just one night, they would both benefit. But suddenly, a sharp sword was pressed to Marielle's throat. It turned out Vincent had reversed the situation. He subdued Marielle and warned her not to move. He lifted her up and said that his actions had been completely hidden from the observer outside the window. Marielle was astonished. She couldn't believe how Vincent had drawn his sword while being pinned down. She hadn't even seen it happen. But Vincent's sudden question startled her. He asked, "Could the Council of Elders really interfere in courtship?" Marielle quickly regained her confidence, smiled, and retorted by asking Vincent what he meant by the Observer or the Council of Elders, saying she only wanted to get closer to him. Vincent coldly exposed her scheme, asking, "You mean getting closer with a stimulant made from Renoxa petals?" Marielle was stunned. She hadn't expected Vincent to know everything from the start. Vincent smirked, called her first love Marielle, and said she always knew how to seize opportunities. In another room, a fist clenched in anger. It was Keshion. He was furious. He cursed Vincent silently for daring to treat him like a fool. Not only that, Keshion was enraged to see Marielle, his first love, seemingly completely fallen for Vincent. Keshion shouted in fury. The companion hurriedly advised him to calm down. A friend said the blizzard had eased, and he would go out to buy some necessities. Keshion only muttered a thanks. As that friend left, Keshion scowled with hatred, clenched his fist, and gritted his teeth. "Just wait, Vincent." However, the apprentice did not leave immediately. He paused at the door, his expression thoughtful. Back with Vincent and Marielle. Vincent directly asked Marielle about the mission she had received from the Council of Elders. Marielle, though restrained, remained cunning. She asked if she told him, he would want her to act as a double agent between him and them. Vincent confidently replied, "Yes, because being on my side will be better for you." Marielle feigned surprise and asked why. Vincent smiled mysteriously and nonchalantly declared, "Because I plan to destroy the Council of Elders in the near future." Vincent's earth-shattering declaration left Marielle completely shocked. Her pupils contracted in astonishment, signaling a major forthcoming change. After Vincent's shocking statement, Mariel fell silent, unsure how to react. She burst out laughing, thinking it absurd. Yet, somehow the words of a madman like Vincent carried a strange persuasiveness. Mariel agreed to cooperate, but first she wanted Vincent to answer one question. Vincent calmly asked, "What?" Blinded by a woman's pride, Mariel bluntly asked Vincent whether he was impotent or if he preferred men. Mariel's blunt question left even the always composed Vincent momentarily stunned. Mariel angrily shouted that it was abnormal for him to be near her so long without his face flushing. Julian was also a little worried. He thought the spirit of some old man had possessed Vincent, causing his body to deteriorate as well. Vincent coldly replied that it was simply because Mariel wasn't his type. In Vincent's mind, no matter how beautiful Mariel was, she still looked like a child. Vincent's words wounded Mariel's pride. She felt utterly humiliated. Despite that, Mariel decided to cooperate with Vincent. She stepped to the window and reached for the curtain. She confessed that she was a spy for the Council of Elders, ordered to seduce and spend the night with him. Once the plan succeeded, they intended to control him through her. In return, they had promised her a bright future. Mariel admitted it was a dirty tactic. She proposed that he report she had successfully seduced him, so the council would let their guard down and reveal weaknesses. To make the charade look real, Mariel sat down beside Vincent. She smiled seductively and said it would be natural for her to stay and sleep here tonight. Immediately, a dangerous gleam flashed in Vincent's eyes. He suddenly used the skill, Thunder Giant, creating an extremely powerful ball of lightning that struck Mariel. Mariel couldn't react in time and was blasted backward by the powerful electric surge. She slammed into the door and collapsed to the floor, groaning in pain. Mariel angrily shouted at Vincent, asking why he treated her that way after they had agreed to cooperate. Vincent, electricity still crackling on his hands, coldly replied that the minimal respect he gave her was not killing her immediately. Mariel was left speechless by Vincent's cruel answer. Horror once again enveloped her. Vincent calmly sat on the edge of the bed, sparks still dancing on his hands. He looked at her and continued, preparing to reveal a truth even more terrible. And it seems, he held up a dead black scorpion and said that the bright future promised to Mariel was actually a lie. Mariel horrifiedly realized it was a level 1 venom scorpion, its poison strong enough to kill an entire giant instantly. She was stunned to acknowledge the brutal truth. Regardless of the outcome, the Council of Elders had intended to kill her. Vincent repeated his words, that the fact he didn't kill her right away was his respect. Then Vincent called out loudly for Tamer, demanding he show himself. A figure in a black cloak appeared in the doorway. The Tamer entered, followed by a terrifying army of insects, praying mantises, centipedes, and many others. He asked how Vincent could have detected the scorpion. Vincent nonchalantly answered that he hadn't detected it. He only guessed it had been smuggled in along with Mariel. Mariel fearfully clung to Vincent's leg. Vincent smirked, revealing a swollen sting mark on his wrist, and said, "It stings kind of hurts." Both the Tamer and Mariel couldn't believe their eyes. They shouted, "Impossible. You resisted the scorpion's venom?" Vincent coldly snapped his fingers, and a drop of black blood spurted from the wound. The poisonous droplet fell to the floor with a sizzle and smoked. Vincent explained that his master adored him. With dragon blood in his veins, the poison had no effect on him. Behind him appeared the image of a gigantic draconic demon. Vincent tauntingly asked the stunned Tamer, "What's next, Tamer?"